Welcome to this week's edition of Speak Spark. I'm Katrina Mitchell, and our special guest today is Andy Core. And Andy is a specialist in helping people thrive in high demand careers. Andy's been researching people for more than a decade, and he loves to share this comment. Says this is the most important comment that he's heard. I know I need to do more at work, live healthier, and be there for my family. What I don't know is how to make it all happen. And Andy, that's your specialty. So Andy has a master's degree in human performance and has been chosen as one of America's top 5 speakers in health and healthcare. But what Andy really is a life balance realist whose success rate at helping people go from wanting to live a more balanced life to actually doing it is 13 times the national average. So Andy, can you explain that? Because I'm not sure that actually made sense.
The statistic?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, if you look at change for individuals, the average amount of time that someone can maintain any change is about 2.5 months on average. And so with the clients that I've worked with, they've averaged at least 2.25 years and longer. And so in research, we know that 2 years is the success mark in long-term change.
Got it. Great. Thank you for making that clear for me. I know you've got a lot to share with us today, so I'm going to turn it over to you. I'm going to jump off a video, but we're going to come back for some Q&A. We've had several folks send questions in for us that I want you to help us with, and we'll turn it over. Take it away, Andy.
Oh, thank you, Katrina. I'm always excited to be on your team. Okay, so what got my idea for this program today is I was having a conversation with one of my franchise clients, and they were saying, gosh, we just had one of our best franchisees leave the business. And I was like, huh. And the question is why do some people who are top performers leave the business, or why do our high potential people leave when they seem to be doing okay? And I was like, well, that's kind of one of my specialties, is really what makes people burn out and leave the business or leave their work or whatever the case may be. And so I took that question, I really started thinking about it. And then I did what I always do, is I dug deep into the research, and I was like, why do some people leave? Why do they burn out? And so I came across this brand new study from Yale University, 1,085 business people like you and I, and they basically assessed their level of engagement, how much vigor they have for their work, how dedicated they are, how absorbed they can get into their work, their engagement level, and then they measured their burnout level. And then they put it on this really cool graph. So this is one that I made to help kind of explain the situation. And so if you look at this graph at the bottom left, let me help you explain that a little bit. On the bottom left down there is the low engagement, low burnout. And so those people are what you would call the apathetic people. They're not engaged, they're not burned out, they're just there. And then at the top on the left side is the high engagement and low burnout. And so if you look at this graph, this is all the data points. Now, to me, that's really interesting because it looks like there's a pretty solid line in the middle. And if you do statistical analysis, a lot of researchers on burnout and hardworking adults, they focus on this particular line, is that the more engaged someone is, the less burnout they experience, right? And so if you look at this graph, at the top left-hand side is high engaged, low burnout. Those are the top performers who thrive in any circumstances, no matter if it's COVID, no matter if it's economic disruption, no matter if it's innovation disruption, they seem to find a way to excel. And then if you look at the far right bottom corner at the end of that line, that's the high burnout people who are also low engaged. And those are the people that I call the strugglers. They still can be successful, but they've just kind of lost that love and feeling about work and their career and their job and their business. And they feel really burned out. And so those people are really at risk for leaving the business. or quitting or changing or just having serious issues. Okay, now, but if you're like me, and whenever I show this to anybody, they always go, but Andy, what about these people up here? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. See, that's the rub in the research on how they think that engagement is the more engaged you are, the lower your burnout is. And see, here's the thing. In this recent Yale University study found that group up there, let me break this into quadrants for you. I think that's a much better way to examine this. So if you look at that top right quadrant, high engagement and high burnout, when you look at that quadrant, I start to think, that's turned out to be 19% of the population. So 1 in 5 people, let's just think about it. On average in your organization, 1 in 5 have high burnout, but they love their job or they love their business, but they're on the verge of burnout. And here's the problem is that this study also found that that population up there has a significant intention to leave. Now, I think this is really important because I bet there were so many people, especially now in COVID, when there's just so much disruption and struggle and work interruption and financial uncertainty. I think there's so much, it's so easy for people to be up in that upper right-hand quadrant. So also when I show this to people, they go, well, what's the difference then, Andy, between the people who are highly engaged that thrive or excel under stress and those that burn out and have an intention to leave? And I said, that's what I focus on. That's my specialty. I'm a human performance researcher. I examine how can people really excel when they have high demand work, big goals, lots of change, and now, especially with considerable disruption, uncertainty. Okay, so we're going to talk about really what does it take to excel? How do we bridge that gap from this guy to this guy? Oh, lost my hand there. So how do you do that? Okay, so the research on excelling under stress, most people think of it as the phrase resilience, because resilient people, they not only bounce back from challenges faster, but they also are more resilient to stress. Stress bothers them less. Basically life isn't as hard for them. They're more motivated, they're more productive, they're more innovative, they have better short-term memory, they have better arithmetic skills because of their resiliency level. It's pretty amazing stuff. So let me show you an example of what resiliency looks like. Okay, so on this graph, on this slide, I guess, in the center is resilient. And that's one of the big 4 aspects of success. And I think it's the key to excelling in stressful times. There are 4 primary categories. There is culture. So does your organizational culture encourage resiliency? I think especially in the franchise world, do you create a profitable partnership that is inclusive, engaging, and authentic and real? And I'm sure that many of you do, but there has to be a little bit of potential change when we have these difficult times. So what are you doing right now that within your culture that really helps people be more resilient? Okay. The second category over to the right, the blue, is environment. So is the actual physical work environment that you are in or that your people are in, does that environment encourage resilience? And I think that's a really important question now, because in the age of COVID and oftentimes many people working from home, or if you work in like food service, for instance, man, how has that industry changed and how they now have to do curbside service when they never had to before? Has that changed their environment? And there's just so many different factors involved. So I think it's really important for you to ask the question, is my environment helping my resiliency? Or is the environment that I'm helping for my people, is it helping their resiliency? Okay, so then if you look at the bottom right, and that's physical well-being. And that's a pretty obvious one, because if your energy is on low, your physical energy, your emotional energy, if your emotional batteries are low, so is your resiliency and so is your motivation. So an emphasis on physical well-being is also particularly important right now from an organizational standpoint, because if you can help your people even just a little bit with their physical resiliency, then it makes dramatic differences. Okay. And then the final piece is the perceptions. It's the psychological resiliency. It's your way of thinking. It's people's mindsets. Because if there is incredible research to show that specific mindsets help people not only deal better with stress, but excel under stressful situations, excel when they're faced with goals that they don't know if they can make, excel when they're faced with consistent interruptions in their creative workflow. I mean, there's so many examples. And the key to psychological resilience are three things. And I'm going to share those with you in just a moment. But before I go, I just want to kind of let you know that we're planning a survey that is not only going to help you assess where you are with these four elements, but also to connect you with other people in the franchise industry to find community solutions to these four issues, these four challenges. So you're going to be able to learn from my experience, but also I think, and even probably more importantly, the experience of your peers and how they're managing their cultural resilience, how they're improving it, how they're improving their environmental, their physical workspace resiliency, their physical well-being for themselves and their people. And then also too, these three mindsets that I'm about to share that are at the heart of excelling under stress. I'll tell you, these three particular mindsets have been shown through, I wish I had more time and I would drive you crazy with all the research on this. The research into these three mindsets has shown that actually these mindsets reduce burnout more than reducing workload. So, I mean, if people can work really, really hard and burn out, but then you can also have people who have these right psychological mindsets, these optimal mindsets to where they don't burn out even at the same or greater workload. These three mindsets have also been shown to help people, even if life gets really difficult and they're not able to get enough quality sleep. People with these three mindsets, this psychological resilience, aren't really impaired by losing sleep to near the level that people that have lower levels of these three mindsets. And it just goes on and on and on. I really believe that the people that have these three mindsets, that have these psychological resilience, can excel no matter what the stress is, not only in their productivity and their patience and their clarity and their well-being, but also just their general overall life satisfaction. And that's a huge piece in this work engagement burnout zone, life satisfaction. So let's talk about how you can get there. Okay. So there are the three mindsets that I've been talking about many times already. The first is a sense of control. So people that are under stress, they oftentimes let fear drive them to start thinking about what may or may not happen, the potential negative outcomes. And once you start down that path, it triggers what's called negative cascade thinking. It's like, oh my gosh, if that happens, then that could happen, then that can happen, then that can happen. And then I could lose my business. I could end up out on the street. I mean, you just go into this irrational negative cascade of thinking that really is detrimental and oftentimes, most of the time, unnecessary and unproductive. Okay, but this idea of stress can trigger that in us unless we have these mindsets. So the first is control. And control, really, I think I could rename it as confidence. So do you believe, here's the question for you. Do you believe that if you work at your goal right now, let's say it is to manage curbside deliveries and grow your business, or let's say it's to manage social distancing with your people and their customers, right? How do you manage that social distancing? Okay. Or it could be, how do you keep yourself from scaring yourself into being anxious about what may or may not happen? Okay, the confidence piece is the people that thrive and excel under stress believe that if they do the work, they can succeed. Now, I know that sounds obvious, but the Pew Institute for Research found that 46% of the US population believes that success is based on luck. I mean, to me, that's so sad. So many people don't believe that if they put in the work, they can succeed. I think that's something to think about from your perspective too, with the people that you most likely lead, and especially even with your loved ones. Do your people truly believe that if they do the work, they can get the result? You see, that's one of the reasons why I love working with franchise organizations, because the franchisors and the ability to create and direct process and proven results adds huge confidence and an essential level of internal control. Okay, so the mindset for you is whenever you start to feel anxious, you start to scare yourself, the anxiety starts to rise up. I want you to think to yourself, okay, if I work at this, can I solve it or not? Can I be successful or not? Yeah, ask yourself that question. And it's a powerful psychological trigger to help you reestablish psychological control, confidence, motivation, clarity. Okay. All right. The second piece really kind of seems like an obvious one, and that is commitment. So, are you committed to your goals or not? So, like when I used to coach people, and when I did, I would ask them the tough love question, right? So, okay, this is a difficult time, but are you committed or not? I'm not criticizing, I just want to know. And the answer is yes, I'm committed. And I think just saying that out loud is a really powerful psychological trigger to create this sense of commitment right there in your mindset, in your thinking, in your life, and in your behaviors. So the way that I want you to think is that whenever you start to feel anxious or overwhelmed, or when your people start to feel anxious or overwhelmed, I want you to ask the question, right? Okay, how important is this? Is this important to you? Is this important to me? So whenever I face a situation like right now, I'm a professional speaker and author. I make 90 to 95% of my income from live in-person events. So you can imagine it's a good thing I'm a stress expert, because the bottom is also falling out on our industry as well, pretty significantly. However, you can either think, okay, I can either scare myself into procrastination or distraction or beer, or I can think, okay, am I committed to this or not? I am committed to this. And that helps me. And then I think, gosh, you know what? If I work on this, can I actually succeed? You know what? I really can. I've done this in the past. In my business, I've gotten past 9/11 and the 2008 economic crash. Both of those times, the meetings industry went to zero nearly. So I've done it before, and I know you have too. You've overcome challenges like this, and how you do that, I believe, with your mind is with these three ideas, these three mindsets. Okay, so let's talk about the last one. Challenge. Now this is one that's not quite as obvious to people, because, yeah, do I have control over if I work, I can succeed. Most people would agree with that, except for the 46% from the Pew Institute study. And then you think commitment, am I committed or not? Is this important to me? Of course it is. All right. And then it's this challenge. So when life smacks you in the face, when COVID hits and really disrupts your life, your business, your future, right? How do you look at that situation? How are you mentally framing it up? Because that will dictate your physical, emotional, and cognitive, your mental response. It is, to me, in today's world, these three things are everything, especially this idea of challenge. And especially if you're a leader in an organization, because your people are facing these same disruptions, interruptions, fear, uncertainty, and they're scaring the crap out of themselves because of what may or may not happen. So you can come in and be a true leader by helping your people with these three simple ideas. Okay, for challenge, I'm going to give you a quick example. Let me say, most people have to deliver bad news at one point or another. And I'm going to give you a research-based, stress-focused way to give bad news better. You get a better response from people. Okay. The thing is that we know when a bad, stressful situation happens, all of a sudden your first thought everybody's first thought is going to be, oh no, right? You could be doom scrolling on your phone and see that the that the Moderna vaccine can create maybe a possible Bell's palsy response in some people. What? All right, so you're going to think, oh no, right? And then that's your first thought. But in psychology, they think the second thought, they've supported the second thought is the most important, and that thought is it's called arousal reappraisal. And you're either going to think one of two ways. You're either going to think, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? And that leads to negative cascade thinking, despair, procrastination, lack of motivation, and scaring yourself. And then, or you can think of what's the challenge here. So the research and resiliency is crystal clear on the people that really excel under stress. They mentally make themselves think that whenever something disruptive, stressful, challenging happens, they think, all right, challenge fuels my growth. I got to tackle this. This is really an opportunity for me to grow. Now, I know that that's pretty motivational speaker-ish, but it really is true. If you can train your mind to think that way. Okay, so the thing about breaking bad news is really simple, is that whenever people break bad news, they say, okay, here's the bad news. We've got to change a process, or you just lost one of your main people in your business. And I'm like, oh no. Right. So, but most people, what they'll do when they're trying to break bad news is they jump right in quickly and step on that oh no moment. They don't give them a chance to have their second thought, and where they're going to think of it as a threat or a challenge. So what they do is they say, let me break some bad news to you. We've got to change this whole technological process. And then the person's going to go, oh no. And then you're going to think, but let me tell you why this really isn't that bad. And see, when you immediately jump in and try to convince people that your viewpoint is not that big. It's not that big of a change. They don't have a chance to have their second thought. You step on their first thought, they feel pushed. So instead, if you wait 3 seconds, say, here's the bad news. And then you just count to yourself, 1, 2, 3. And then let me tell you how. And then at that point, you give them the chance to start forming their second thought, and you can help direct them to this idea that challenge is simply an opportunity for growth. And then you can support that by things like, in the past, I've learned this. Here, we need to learn from here for this. And you give people proactivity cues that help trigger that response. Okay, I only have a short time with you today, and I know I've covered a lot in a short time, but I really hope that I've broken it down to you into a really simple process. Is that to realize that, let me back up, to excel under stress, resiliency is based on 4 things: culture, environment, physical well-being, and your mindsets, your perspective on the stressful situations. And then I've given you 3 very specific mindsets to use to employ the top 3 perspectives, mindsets, beliefs that help people excel under any circumstances. And I hope too that when the opportunity arises to join our survey and be a part of that community solution to, thriving in these high demand, challenging times, I hope you take that opportunity, because I believe it's going to be a very, very important project.
Well, Andy, thank you so much. I took 3 pages of notes, and I've heard you speak over and over again in the last 10 years, and I learned a ton. So I love that tip of waiting 3 seconds. I know that I am absolutely guilty of stepping on it, right? Of saying, okay, this is what's happening, and this is what we're going to do about it, because I want to go with the solution. But that is just so informative, really impactful. Thank you.
Oh, of course. It really is. I didn't get to go into it as much depth as I typically do, and really to show, how deep this idea really is and how strong it is, solid it is. But it really does, if you can connect with people, it just connects with people in a flow that matches their thinking. And really, when you get to where you're working in kind of a synchronous way with people's thinking, it really creates a positive emotional response.
That's great. Thank you. We have a couple questions that have come in, and so I want to get these answered for our community. So especially now, I think 8 months into this, 9 months into this, we're all like, I think, getting accustomed to the unpredictability and the fact that things are changing. And I actually am really hesitant to use the words uncertainty or, uncharted waters. It's just like, oh, enough of that. Like, it is what it is. This is where we are. So we all need to get here today. This is where we are. We don't know where we're going, but I guess I just want to know how can we reduce that feeling of fear for people who are really glommed on to wanting things to be the way that they were, or even the way they are, because we know they're going to change tomorrow. So.
Well, Katrina, I really think that you're a different breed because I think that you're a top performer. I mean, that's why your business is so good and so proficient and efficient. I mean, because most people aren't where you are yet. They are still scared to death because, like I was talking about, doom scrolling on your phone, your iPad, if you're looking at the news, or you're looking at Facebook. I mean, it's easy to get triggered into fear. Okay, so I mean, to really kind of answer your question, I think we need to go at this idea of overwhelm. Um, I interviewed a really amazing psychologist, and I said, "Hey, a lot of my people that I work with, are worried about being overwhelmed. They get overwhelmed a lot. How do you help them with that?" And he goes, Andy, overwhelm is a soft word. Because that's a fancy word. We're Arkansas. That's a fancy word for an emotion. Okay, and so there are only 4 emotions. And I think this really helps people because if you get the fuzzy thinking out and you get them to what's really going on, they're much more able to adapt to the situation. Okay, so let's say you're overwhelmed and you say, Andy, I'm overwhelmed. And I say, overwhelmed is not an emotion. There's only 4. It's fear, it's anger, it's sadness, and it's gladness, happiness, right? I'm glad, sad, mad, or angry. I mean, glad, sad, afraid, or angry. Okay, so which of those are you? And man, just a little exercise like that really helps people just go, what?
Yeah.
Oh my God, I'm afraid. Or they think, oh, I'm angry. Actually, I feel overwhelmed because I'm angry because I'm given this project and it's not really mine. And they go through that and they can help process it. And I think that really helps. So I think in today's times right now, our challenging times, whenever you feel anxious, ask yourself, is it mad, glad, sad, or scared?
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. As soon as you said that, I was like, oh yeah, of course, I'm scared when I get overwhelmed. And I say that a lot to myself. I'm like, oh, I'm so overwhelmed, but I'm just scared that I'm not going to do the right things in the right amount of time or whatever that is. It's awesome. Thank you. So our next question is, you mentioned that some people thrive and some struggle under the same situations. How can we tell how someone's going to react to a stressful situation?
Yeah, well, a lot of my research in grad school was on gender difference and stress response, right? And so after that $50,000 student loan, I learned that men and women are different. Biochemically in how we respond to stress, but there are also massive similarities, right? So how do you know how someone's going to react? Well, you really don't. So that's why I think you don't know for sure. So I think you need to break it down and simplify it, clarify it. Clarity is energy in a complex world. And so that's why what I tried to do in this program today, break down, how do you excel under stress? It's about resiliency. Okay, well, what's resiliency? It's these 4 things. Right. And I think especially in the franchise industry, one of the strengths is this ability for peer support. And if I owned a franchise organization, I would be all in right now on peer support. I would increase the mentor-mentee relationship opportunities. I would increase peer support, focus groups, masterminds. I would be all in on that because if you look at what really makes people totally burn out, it's because they feel like they're going it alone for too long. So you've got to get people together, connection, especially now in the time of social distancing, to help manage that situation.
Yeah. I so appreciate that. And it just clicks with me. You and several of our other top franchise speakers that we've worked with for the last 10 years, that's exactly what happened when COVID hit. We all just connected and said, how can we help? How can we help each other? How can we help the industry? And it really made a huge difference for me. So I want to thank you personally and professionally. Thanks for pointing that out. So really good stuff. One more question. Do we have time for one more?
Absolutely.
Okay. So the question is, for some in our industry, even when we are surrounded by people, we can sometimes feel like we're going it alone. And, I think that that's especially for franchise business owners are feeling like, I've put all my life savings into this business. I've got to support my family. I've got to take care of my financial obligations. Yes, I'm part of the system, but ultimately it's me. So I know you just talked about some really great ideas for the franchisor to do, but what can an individual do to feel like they're not so isolated?
I feel like honestly, this is probably one of the most important, most beneficial things that we could do right now. And as a speaker, I mean, many of the audiences that I've spoken to for you are 1,000 people, but you can be in a room with 1,000 people and feel alone if you don't have your mindset right. And so I think if as an individual, I think like many of the franchisees, I'm kind of on the island by myself, I mean, I have staff and I've got customers and who I greatly appreciate, but I need peer support. I think that's the answer for franchisees right now is that the way I would approach it is, well, before that, let me just tell you, make sure you know how important this is. One of my favorite theories of motivation is called the self-determination theory of motivation. And basically it says that the more time you feel like you're going it alone, the harder it is to be and stay motivated. And I think the less resilient it makes you. So connection is key, right? So, but how do you do that? I suggest that if you have, I often ask my audiences, raise your hand for me if you have a mentor. I'm shocked by how few people have a mentor. I say, raise your hand if you are a mentor. I'm shocked by how few there are there. I said, raise your hand if you meet at least once a month with fellow people, your peers. I'm shocked. I mean, those three areas right there, I think can solve so much of that negativity that can be associated with challenging times is that sense of connection. And that's what my suggestion would be for the franchisees. I would encourage them to jump on board with anything that, their organization provides to help increase your peer support and your ability to be a mentor or be mentored. Those things are incredible.
Awesome. Great advice. Great advice. And I can really see that. I can also really see it from a franchisor's perspective. And we have a lot of great strategic partners like Brian Schnell at Faegre Drinker, and he's constantly creating franchisor panels and discussions and ways for franchisor leaders to connect with each other. So really appreciate that. This has been so informative for me. I don't want to stop talking to you. I never want to stop talking to you, Andy, but let's do some more. I don't want to make this too long. The goal of Speak Spark, as everyone knows, is to give you quick bites of information that you can digest without a huge time commitment. So we will say goodbye here in just a moment. We're going to take a break now from Speak Spark until mid-January, and our next guest will be Greg Nathan, author of Profitable Partnerships and the founder of the Franchise Relationships Institute. And Greg will be visiting a lot of different topics. So I wanted to, there you go. Oh, look, there's Andy. Yay.
I've got it bookmarked. His book is fantastic. So I'll definitely, if I can join, I'll be there as well.
Awesome. That's so great. Well, Andy, I want to thank you with all my heart for your partnership. Thank you for all the great work you do for all of our clients. Again, I said at the beginning that everyone we send you to is just over the moon thrilled with your pre-program research and your authenticity and your sense of humor. You're a very fun, very smart guy and a very fun guy. And your delivery is always, it's always enlightening and really worth the time invested. Thank you.
Thank you, Katrina. I want to get my wife in here for you to say that again, if that's okay. I'm smart as fuck.
We have it on tape, so.
Okay, there we go. Perfect.
You can play
No,
it.
it's always an honor to be on your team. Anytime you send me a client, I know it's going to be a good fit. So that's one of the most important things in this business.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that, Andy. Thank you so much, Andy, for your time. Really, really appreciate it. And we'll be seeing more from Andy soon. And please look out for the survey.
Absolutely.